My name is Chloe. I am 28 years old, and I am the one who completely destroyed my perfect sister's dream wedding, turning her fairy tale into a public nightmare in front of 300 guests. I was standing in the shadows near the grand ballroom doors, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, clutching the small black remote control that would trigger the disaster. Madison was twirling on the polished dance floor in her custom silk gown, laughing that flawless, tinkling laugh of hers as her new husband pulled her close. Everyone looked at her with pure adoration, just like they always did, entirely blind to the monster hiding behind that angelic painted smile. The cold sweat on my palms made the plastic remote slip, but I gripped it tighter, feeling the sharp edge dig painfully into my skin. In my purse, resting heavy against my hip like a loaded weapon, were the 3 hidden letters I had found just 48 hours ago.
Letters that proved my entire life of failures, rejections, and heartbreaks wasn't just a streak of bad luck, but a meticulous, cruel design orchestrated by the beautiful bride herself. As the DJ announced the special sister tribute video, asking everyone to direct their attention to the giant screens, I pressed the red button, knowing there was absolutely no turning back and that the ugly truth was about to detonate. Before I tell you exactly what flashed on those massive screens and how the flawless Madison finally crumbled to pieces in front of everyone she wanted to impress, I want to ask you something quickly. Where are you listening to the story from? Drop your city or state in the comments, because I really love knowing how far my story is traveling and connecting with people from all over the country. Now, to make you truly understand how we reached that point of no return at the reception, I need to take you back to the very beginning, to the suffocating environment that created this toxic dynamic. For as long as I can remember, the air in our house was always filtered through Madison's achievements.
The way she was treated created a deep wound in my self-esteem that I carried everywhere. My sister Madison, who is now 30 years old, was the undisputed golden child of our family. She was the one who walked earlier, talked earlier, and brought home report cards filled with straight A's without ever seeming to open a single textbook. I, on the other hand, was always the clumsy shadow, the rough second draft, the one who tried entirely too hard and still always managed to fall short of expectations. My mother, Susan, who is 58 years old, and my father, David, who is 60 years old, always meant well, or at least I spent my entire life convincing myself that they did. But their eyes only truly lit up. Their smiles only reached their eyes when they were looking at her. They bought her a brand new car for her 16th birthday, while I had to take the bus to my part-time job. Growing up, I normalized the feeling of being second best.
If I won a local science fair, Madison would coincidentally get accepted into an elite summer program the very same week, completely overshadowing my small victory. Our parents would put my ribbon on the fridge for a day, but Madison's acceptance letter would be framed and hung in the hallway. I swallowed my jealousy, telling myself that she was simply better, smarter, and more deserving. I forced myself to be the supportive younger sister, the cheerleader who clapped the loudest at her graduations and smiled the brightest in her shadow. I thought that was just my role in life. I convinced myself that my mediocrity was just a fact of nature, something I couldn't change no matter how hard I tried. The pressure reached an absolute boiling point when Madison got engaged to Ethan, a kind, successful architect who was 32 years old. Ethan was everything our parents ever dreamed of for their perfect daughter, and the wedding planning quickly became a military operation. Madison, playing the gracious sibling, asked me to be her maid of honor. I was exhausted from the start, running errands, dealing with her constant tantrums over floral arrangements, and essentially acting as her unpaid personal assistant. I thought I was doing the right thing, supporting her big day, unaware of the venom she held for me. I spent hours writing the perfect maid of honor speech, trying to ignore the bitter taste in my mouth every time I praised her. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, just 2 days before the wedding, when my world completely shattered.
Madison had sent me to our parents' house to fetch a specific rustic wooden picture frame she wanted for the welcome table. I walked into her pristine childhood bedroom, a shrine to her perfection that our mother kept exactly as Madison had left it. The air was stale, smelling faintly of vanilla and old perfume. I opened her closet, searching the top shelves for the frame, pushing aside old shoeboxes and high school yearbooks. As I reached toward the back, my hand knocked over a heavy wooden box hidden beneath a stack of old winter sweaters.
The floorboards creaked under my weight as I navigated the room, feeling like an intruder in a museum dedicated to her greatness. The box hit the floor with a loud thud, the rusty latch springing open upon impact. I knelt down to pick up the spilled contents, expecting to find old jewelry or useless teenage trinkets. Instead, my fingers brushed against a stack of yellowed envelopes tied together with a faded blue ribbon. Something about the way they were hidden, shoved so far back in the darkest corner of the closet, made my stomach drop. I felt a cold chill run down my spine, an instinctual warning that I was about to uncover something I was never meant to see. I sat on the floor, the rain beating against the window, and untied the ribbon. My heart started to race, a heavy drumbeat echoing in my ears as the dust motes danced in the dim light coming from the window. The first letter I pulled from the stack was thick, the expensive parchment paper unmistakable. It was addressed to me, dated 9 years ago, bearing the official seal of the Chicago Art Institute. My breath hitched in my throat.
When I was 19, attending that school was my ultimate dream. I had poured my soul into my portfolio, waiting agonizing months for a response that I believed never came. The silence from the school had crushed my spirit, convincing me I had no talent, leading me to abandon art entirely and settle for a miserable corporate job. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. "Dear Chloe, we are thrilled to offer you admission to our fine arts program." The words blurred as tears instantly filled my eyes. I had been accepted. I was good enough. My dream hadn't rejected me. My own sister had. Madison had intercepted the mail, stolen my acceptance letter, and hidden it away in this dark box while I cried myself to sleep for months, mourning a future I thought I wasn't worthy of having. A wave of nausea washed over me. The betrayal was so deep, so profound, that it physically hurt, like a heavy weight crushing my chest. But the nightmare was just beginning. I wiped my eyes, my vision swimming, and reached for the second envelope. This one had my name hastily scribbled on the front, in handwriting I recognized immediately. It was from Mark. Mark was 29 years old when we dated, and he was the only man I had ever truly loved. 4 years ago, we had a stupid, terrible argument, and he just disappeared. He stopped answering my calls, moved out of his apartment, and ghosted me completely. It took me years of therapy to get over the crippling abandonment issues that breakup caused. I stared at the envelope, my heart pounding in my ears. He was the kind of man who made me feel safe, who listened to my fears, and made me believe I was actually worth something. I pulled out the lined paper, unfolding it slowly. "Chloe, please forgive me," the letter began. Mark wrote about how sorry he was for the fight, how much he loved me, and how he was waiting at our favorite coffee shop on Sunday at noon to talk things out and propose. He had bought a ring. He wanted to marry me. The letter was dated the Friday before that Sunday. I never showed up because I never got the letter. Madison had taken this too. She let me believe the man I loved had abandoned me like trash, watching me spiral into depression while she comforted me with fake sympathy. Reading those words, knowing he had waited for me at that cafe for hours, completely broke my heart all over again. I was hyperventilating now, gasping for air in the quiet room. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold the third piece of paper. It wasn't an envelope this time, but a page ripped straight from a leather-bound journal. It was written in Madison's perfectly looped, elegant handwriting. I forced myself to read the words, each sentence acting like a stab to the heart. It was a diary entry dated just a few days after I had received my rejection from the Art Institute. What I read was so incredibly evil, it made my blood run completely cold.
Seeing Chloe cry over that art school thing was the absolute highlight of my year, Madison had written. I can't let her have anything that makes her shine brighter than me. It's just the natural order of things. She needs to stay beneath me where she belongs. If she leaves, who will I look better than?
The pure malice dripping from those words paralyzed me. This wasn't just sibling rivalry. This was psychological torture. She had systematically destroyed my happiness, my career, and my love life, simply to maintain her own fragile ego and her status as the superior daughter. She didn't just want to succeed. She desperately needed me to fail. My misery was the foundation of her unearned confidence. I didn't scream. I didn't cry anymore. The profound sorrow instantly evaporated, replaced by a dark, burning rage that I had never felt before in my entire life. I carefully folded the letters, placed them gently into my purse, and walked out of that house, leaving the wooden box on the floor. I drove straight home in complete silence, my mind racing with a million chaotic thoughts. I needed to destroy her. I needed to tear down the fake, perfect life she had built on the ruins of mine. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed someone to anchor me to reality. I didn't trust myself to be alone with my thoughts, terrified of what I might do if I didn't have someone to ground my anger. I immediately called my best friend Sarah, who was 29 years old, and told her to come over right away. Sarah had been my rock through the art school rejection and the devastating breakup with Mark. When she walked through my front door, she took one look at my pale, tear-stained face and knew something catastrophic had happened. We sat on the rug in my living room, and I placed the 3 letters on the coffee table. I didn't say a word. I just pushed them toward her and watched as she read them one by one. We sat there for hours, dissecting every single interaction I had ever had with my sister, seeing the manipulation clearly now. I watched Sarah's expression morph from confusion to shock, and finally to absolute, unadulterated fury. She slammed her hand on the table, her eyes wide with disbelief. "She is a monster, Chloe, a literal psychopath," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling with anger. "You cannot let her get away with this. You have to tell your parents. You have to tell Ethan." But I shook my head. Telling them privately wouldn't work.
Madison would cry, manipulate the situation, claim I forged them out of jealousy, and my parents would likely protect her to save face. "No," I said, my voice shockingly calm. "If I do it privately, she'll spin it. She'll make me the crazy, jealous sister trying to ruin her wedding week. The only way to stop her is to expose her where she can't hide, in front of everyone she wants to impress." Sarah looked at me, a slow, determined nod forming. As the maid of honor, I was in charge of the slideshow presentation for the reception. I had all the access. I had the power to change the narrative. We spent the entire night scanning the letters, highlighting the cruelest parts, and formatting a new video. The next evening was the rehearsal dinner. I don't know how I managed to keep a straight face. I sat across from Madison, watching her clink glasses and accept compliments, radiating pure joy. Every time she smiled at me and called me her sweet little sister, I felt bile rise in my throat. I smiled back, playing my part perfectly, knowing the exact time and place of her upcoming execution.
Ethan thanked me for all my hard work, completely oblivious to the fact that his beautiful bride was a master manipulator. I felt a pang of guilt for ruining his day, but he needed to know the truth. The morning of the wedding was a chaotic blur of hairspray, champagne, and nervous energy. I stood behind Madison as she looked at herself in the mirror, wearing a dress that cost more than my car. "You look beautiful," I told her, my voice hollow. She squeezed my hand, a picture-perfect moment of sisterly love for the photographer. I felt the hard edges of the flash drive in my pocket, the drive that contained the real slideshow. I sneaked away while the bridesmaids were taking group photos and found the audio-visual technician in the ballroom, handing him the new drive and giving him specific instructions. The ceremony itself was agonizing. I stood at the altar, holding Madison's massive bouquet, listening to them exchange vows about honesty, trust, and unwavering love.
I watched my parents wipe away tears of joy in the front row. It took every ounce of my willpower not to scream right then and there, but I held my tongue. I needed the reception. I needed the moment when all 300 guests were seated, relaxed, and completely focused on the screens. The tension inside me was building to an unbearable level, my muscles tight and aching from the effort of holding it all in. The reception began with a grand entrance, a lavish dinner, and speeches that praised Madison's endless virtues. Then the lights dimmed. The DJ's voice echoed through the massive speakers, announcing the special presentation. And now, a special look back at our beautiful bride, lovingly prepared by her maid of honor and sister, Chloe. The crowd politely applauded. I retreated to the shadows near the back doors, holding the remote the technician had given me. I looked at Madison, sitting at the sweetheart table, her face glowing in the dim light. I took a deep breath and pressed play. The huge screens dropped down, and a soft, sentimental piano melody filled the room. For the first 10 seconds, it was exactly what everyone expected. Cute childhood photos of Madison, family vacations, her high school graduation. The crowd awed and smiled. Then, the music suddenly distorted, slowing down into a low, eerie hum. The childhood photos vanished, replaced by a stark, high-definition scan of the Chicago Art Institute letter. I had used a bright red digital marker to highlight the date, my name, and the word accepted. Whispers began to ripple through the tables. People were confused, squinting at the screen to read the text. Before they could fully process it, the screen transitioned to the second letter, Mark's desperate plea for forgiveness, his proposal, the date that proved Madison had hidden it. The whispers turned into a loud, uncomfortable murmur. I watched my parents at the front table. My mother had her hand over her mouth, her face drained of all color. My father was staring at the screen, his brow furrowed in deep confusion. Then came the grand finale. The screen faded to black for a second before displaying the ripped page from Madison's journal. The text was massive, undeniable. Seeing Chloe cry over that art school thing was the absolute highlight of my year. She needs to stay beneath me where she belongs. The silence in the ballroom was deafening. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, the kind that only happens when 300 people collectively stop breathing. The piano music had stopped entirely. The ugly, unfiltered truth was projected 20 feet high for everyone to see. "Turn it off!" Madison's shrill scream shattered the silence. She jumped up from her table, knocking over her champagne glass, her perfect face contorted in panic and rage. "Turn it off, right now! It's fake! It's a lie!" She looked wildly around the room, her eyes finally landing on me in the back. "Chloe, you jealous bitch, what did you do?" she shrieked, lifting her heavy dress and storming toward me. But before she could take more than a few steps, Ethan grabbed her arm. His face was unreadable, a mask of cold shock. "Is that your handwriting?" Ethan asked, his voice low but carrying across the dead silent room. "Ethan, she's always been jealous of me," Madison cried, tears streaming down her face, playing the victim one last time. I walked forward slowly, emerging from the shadows. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I calmly reached into my purse, pulled out the 3 original physical letters, and dropped them onto the sweetheart table right in front of him. "Check the ink, Ethan. Check the dates. Check the journal in her childhood bedroom," I said, my voice steady and clear. Ethan picked up the journal page. He stared at it for what felt like an eternity. He knew her handwriting intimately. He traced the loops of her letters with his thumb. He looked up at Madison, and the disgust in his eyes was absolute. "You destroyed your own sister's life just to feel superior?" he whispered, dropping the paper as if it were on fire. "I can't marry this. I don't even know who you are." He took off his suit jacket, threw it over the back of his chair, and walked straight out of the ballroom without looking back. The crowd erupted into chaos. My parents rushed the stage, but it was too late. The damage was done. The facade was completely shattered. Madison collapsed onto the floor, sobbing hysterically in her ruined silk dress, surrounded by the physical evidence of her cruelty. Guests were already grabbing their coats and leaving, the grand celebration turning into a massive evacuation. I stood there for a moment, watching the empire of the golden child burn to the ground. For the first time in my 28 years, I didn't feel like a shadow. I felt light. I felt entirely free. I walked out of the venue, the cool night air hitting my face, washing away the suffocating tension of the past decade. The fallout was nuclear. The wedding was canceled, Ethan moved out, and my parents were forced to confront the monster they had enabled. They tried to call me, to fix things, to sweep it under the rug, but I blocked their numbers. I packed my apartment, quit my miserable job, and moved across the country to start over. I am currently taking night classes for art, finally picking up the brushes I dropped 9 years ago. Looking back, I learned a brutal but necessary lesson about family. Blood does not give anyone the right to destroy your soul, and sometimes the only way to heal from the darkness is to drag the monsters into the glaring light.
I don't regret what I did, not for a single second, because exposing her cruelty was the only way I could finally start living my own life. It took burning down her fake fairy tale to build my own reality. What about you? Would you do the same if you found out your own family had sabotaged your entire life? Until the next story.